Latinos in Clinical Researchers. Thank you so much for being here in today's webinar. It is our second of the series for career pathways. This is so that you can get to know the co-founders of Latinos in Clinical Research and their career pathways. And as we continue to go, we will start grabbing more and more individuals, members, as well as people that we've met have really amazing backgrounds and stories so that you understand and know that, there's not just one way or two ways or three ways. There's multiple ways in this industry. So let's go ahead and introduce the co-founder, Judy Galindo. Judy, so give us a little background, how you started, where you're at right now, etc.
Yeah, so I started in clinical research about 17 years ago as a research assistant when I was in college. I think my third year, I responded to an ad on Craigslist for a research assistant position for a sleep disorders research clinic in Mira Mesa. I responded, I got interviewed. I didn't know what it was about, but they hired me. And I actually had to go into the office a few hours during the week, certain days of the week at night, I think like after 5 o'clock, to administer questionnaires to our patients that would stay the night for the overnight visits for the sleep studies. Very basic questionnaires. I think I would have to do like vital signs and a few other basic things. So I would work along with the sleep techs that worked at night, just go in a few hours, do that, and then go back and then do that a few days a week. And then eventually I moved into help create a call center. They didn't have a call center. At that time, 17 years ago, sleep disorder research study was huge. So we were always busy. We had a bunch of studies going on, a bunch of patients. So there was always patients coming in for sleep visits. It was usually 2 nights in a row they had to do, or sometimes 3 nights in a row. So we were always pre-screening patients over the phone, but they never had an official like a call center set up. So I helped set that up. We hired more staff. I worked in that for a bit. And then I moved into a research assistant position, assisting the study coordinators. So whatever they needed help with, I would help with. I became familiar with creating source docs. So they called me the source doc queen because I would create the source docs for all the new studies that we would start. And I did that for a while until I finally started getting more training on becoming a study coordinator. And then eventually I became study coordinator with my own studies. And then eventually I also was sent to other locations we had. So there was a few locations in the LA area, one in San Francisco, and then I think in Fountain Valley. And so I would actually go and help other coordinators out with anything they needed, whether it was source documents, assisting with data entry and stuff like that. So at that same time when I was a coordinator, I was also kind of training to be a manager, because they would send me, and I actually offered, I was the one like, I want to go because I want to learn all this stuff and I want to keep, advancing in clinical research. And then the last position I had within the company was for an office in El Centro that they were trying to set up a research center with a sleep doctor that actually worked in San Diego, but he had his private office in El Centro. And so they actually opened a research center, and I would go down there and help the coordinators out. That only lasted for, I think, a few years. It didn't really go anywhere. And then at that time, we actually, there were some investors that were looking to buy the research center, and they actually did. And then after that, things changed, just the whole atmosphere, the type of studies we did. We weren't as busy at that time. And I actually wanted to move up. I was ready. I felt I had done everything I could do at that company. I wanted to be a manager. I actually wanted to manage one of the other sites. I didn't get that position. And I think that's when I realized that, I think it was time for me to move on. I'm very thankful for that research center, because that's where I learned everything about clinical research over several years. I had a lot of support. My coworkers were amazing. It's just everything that I have, like I know now, I learned from that research center. So I think my next step after that was like, maybe I should be a monitor. So after I left that company, I actually went to apply to a few CROs. And I actually do remember getting an interview with PPD, but I didn't. After going through
your favorite company, Matt.
Yeah.
But at that time, I think they offered me a position, I was kind of like, I don't know if I want to jump into this. You know, I had just graduated college, and I was like, I don't know, am I ready to be a monitor? Because I knew, you know, you had to travel, you were going to be all over the place. I didn't have kids. I was single at that time, so I could have done it, but I felt like there was more I wanted to do at a clinical research site level. Like I wasn't ready to take that jump. So I actually reached out to one of the doctors that we used to subcontract with at the El Centro office, and he was a psychiatrist, and I asked him for a letter of recommendation because I was, you know, looking to go into something else in clinical research. And when he found that out, he was like, hey, I want you to come down and meet with me and another doctor. We want to open a research center. And so that's how Sun Valley Research Center started 13 years ago.
That's
awesome. Yeah. So it was kind of not, I mean, I guess I didn't know what I was expecting at that time. So I knew everything that I knew from research, but not actually running it. I've never done all that part. Setting up a research center was all new to me. So I took the chance because I didn't really have anything else going on. I mean, either I was going to go be a monitor or I was going to go work for another research center, or I could do this, start this research center. And so I did. And for a few years, you know, it was like getting the research center set up. What equipment do we need? All the, you know, licenses, insurance, whatever things you need to do, plus the whole business development. Like, how are we going to get sites? And I mean, how are we going to get research studies? And how are we're going to get noticed as a site? We did reach out, like I reached out to a few people I knew in clinical research at that time. And that we also worked with, I guess you can say a study broker of the first couple of years who actually referred a few studies to us. And that's how we kind of started getting busy and getting noticed. After a few years, we just kind of started getting studies on our own, repeat studies with CROs and sponsors. And then from there, it just grew all in psychiatry, mostly psychiatry, some CNS. And then it started with me. We actually took one of the staff from one of our doctors' private practice to work with us in research. She was really interested. So she's actually one of the coordinators I've had the longest. She's still with us to this day. And then we hired other staff over the years and trained them, but everybody had to be trained. There's no clinical research trainings or centers at that time in that area. So it was still new to everybody, still new today. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. So now I oversee this research center, make sure, you know, everyone's doing their job, that we have all these studies going on, that we're recruiting, that, you know, are we reaching out to the community to find our patients? Are we collaborating? Like everything. I'm in charge of everything.
So
awesome.
So when did you start Sun Valley? How many years ago?
So about 13 years ago. So I was in research for like 4 years prior to that.
Sure. Mm-hmm. And getting back to the company you initially started with, if they were sending you to San Francisco, it sounds as though you could have worked or participated in a sleep study on your own. That's something else, especially for having you drive there.
Yeah. No, they actually would cover the airfare and my hotel meals, and no, it was. And
That's
if
nice.
I would drive to the closer offices. Like if it was in LA or Fountain Valley, that was easier to drive to because that's like a few hours away. But no, San Francisco, they would fly me out, and I actually like going, so of course I would offer.
Sure, absolutely.
I actually think it's pretty awesome where you said that in college you know you were already kind of doing research. For me in college, it's kind of like, you know, it was always in my, you know, face. I just never knew. They had a, you know, especially the rural area, right? They had this sector where you could go in and they were doing like diabetes checks and things like that. And it was some sort of research that was happening. And yeah, so I mean, it's pretty awesome that you took advantage of your own research availability there when you were in college.
But it's weird because I did fall into it though. So I was a pre-med biology major in college. I thought I was going to go to med school, and then I realized after taking all these science classes that I don't know if I was going to be able to handle med school. And I didn't like the lab research. I didn't like the whole university research or being out in the field collecting. I didn't like any of that. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, what am I going to do with this degree? And then I don't know why I was even looking for a job, maybe a part-time job. And I responded to this research assistant job. And then I realized this whole other field that existed that I never knew existed. And yeah, that was my calling, I guess. And I didn't even know.
That's awesome. I honestly wish that was kind of my situation with you. Cause like, I liked the classes. I had medical genomics, but what ended up happening to me is after like 400 hours of shadowing different specialties, I was like, okay, it's probably not going to happen, you know, but that's awesome. That is so awesome that you had that opportunity and like your whole journey. That's, you know, all these years and you being as successful as you've been. And then, you know, even now here you have that next level of exposure within the industry. So that's great. And I'm like super grateful that I get to not just be around you, but everybody, right? I'm really learning a lot from all of y'all and your journeys. But so I guess one thing I would say, since you have been a site owner for a while now, what would you say is one of the biggest things that helped you grow the most? Like out of all the, I guess, qualities or skill sets that you learned, the one thing that's pretty much continued to give throughout the years?
Yeah, working at the first research center, I learned so many skills, but the one thing I always took away from them is working in a team setting. I mean, we had several coordinators, we had a few research assistants, and everybody would jump in and help out each other. Doesn't matter if whoever the coordinator was of the study and whatever was going on, but somebody would handle the blood work and process it, and we'd all be working on it. Doesn't matter if we were all coordinators, we'd still help with whatever we could. And then we'd, have our lunches together. It's just that whole group atmosphere. So I remember when we started the research center, as we grew, I wanted it to be like a team effort, like a family. You spend so much time at work. We want it to be fun, but then, you have to do your work too. So I think I took that with me, and I wanted it to be a lot more comfortable. Because at the same time, sometimes working at these places, like especially with the doctors and nurse practitioners, they're not always so accessible, and you can't always go and talk to them, and you don't feel so comfortable. And I wanted that to be different at the research center that we have. I wanted it to be like where we can interact with each other. And it doesn't matter what your background was, like whether it was a doctor, NP, and that we can collaborate and have these conversations about research when we run into issues like, hey, we have this protocol and this criteria, and we have these patients, but I'm not sure, like I need to go ask the doctor. You have to be able to be comfortable doing that. And so that's the type of atmosphere I think we have at work. I feel like it's more like a family, like they're my second family.
That's
Sure.
nice.
So do you have I'm just curious, do you have any regrets on the pathway you chose? Or ever any kind of hindsight, I wish I would have went this route? Or
No, I don't. I just, I think I mentioned this before, maybe in another video, that I wish I would have maybe gone back to school and maybe done like become a nurse practitioner or PA, because in our community that's really needed in Imperial County. There's not too many bilingual nurse practitioners or bilingual physician assistants, and I think there's a lack of it. Actually, we've been trying to hire one for research and our doctor's private clinic, and it's so hard to find any candidates that want to work in Imperial County that have that background, and much less a doctor. It's impossible to bring in a doctor. So I kind of wish I would have gone back to school, because I think
it's never too late, though.
It's never too late. I know, and it's on my list. Yes, I know. I've looked into a nurse practitioner program. I just have to take a lot of prerequisites that I don't know.
What are you? This is probably not a good thing to record, but what are you? 35?
I wish. I'm 39.
39.
Oh,
that's not too late.
Thank you.
Go, Judy.
It's not too late. I know. We'll see. I've looked into it. No, I have looked into it, and it's kind of one of those, you have a bucket list of things you want to do. Sure. And I think since I didn't go to med school, but I still always wanted to be, can I be a PA? Could I be an NP and help patients on that aspect? So we'll see.
Yeah.
Something I will say, given that you brought up schooling, for me, I went that route, the pre-PA society and all that stuff. I was getting ready for med school and then PA school. I definitely, for me, it's definitely not in the cards. But I really do wish that prior to graduating, I wish that I would have known about, y'all's academies, CRC Security Academy. I would have honestly have done it. I would have done it hands down. I would have saved myself an extra loan from basic classes, and I would have taken y'all's academy and got myself a job and secured a job before I would have came out, and would have been good to go. So for any of y'all listening, it's not a shameless plug. This is complete honesty. It would have saved me so much time and probably a lot of money as a student and as a graduate. So yeah, I mean, Judy's definitely going back to school because she wants that. I think if I could do anything, it would more than likely be getting the certification with you guys. So
it's still important you finish at least your undergraduate degree.
Oh yes, no, of course, most definitely.
And I'm actually a true believer of education. I definitely think, you know, it's not for everyone, I understand, but if you really want to keep going and educating yourself, you should. I mean, I'm a certified clinical research coordinator through ACRP, and I got my certification years ago. I think when, I don't know if I was still in my research center, I had left, and I've kept it valid because I think it's important to me. I'm working on my master's degree right now through UCSC in advanced studies in clinical research, because I think that was an easier route right now, but I am still looking like maybe I'll keep going to school when the time is right, or, you know, after my master's. But I think it is important. You got to always keep learning, educating yourself, especially on clinical research and in other areas. And
Definitely.
Keep going if you can.
So, this is curiosity. I'm asked this question all the time. How hard is it to pass the ACRP, the test?
Oh, you know what?
Could you pass it now? Because you don't have to take it once you remember again.
I mean, I would hope I could pass it now. I think I could pass it now, but I've heard it's really hard now compared to when I took it, which was, I don't know, I'm thinking like 14 years ago, maybe I took it.
I've read those forums in ACRP, and I'm just like, wow, okay.
Yeah. And actually we have, I have one of my coordinators who I'm trying to get to take it, and, you know, she didn't pass the first time, but that's okay. We're working on her to get it, get it done.
ACRP is like $350, $400 per test.
Yeah.
Right?
I think it's
something like that.
Yeah. I think it's $350.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I remember
SOCRA's a little more, I believe. I think it's
SOCRA is more, but they're I don't think just for clinical research coordinator like certified. I think it's a professional, so like kind of the full spectrum.
Right.
So yeah, I do think that there's just more and probably a little bit harder too. Who knows?
And you know, the other thing I didn't mention, because I know we were talking about clinical research, that before I got into clinical research, I was working as an accounting assistant. And then over the years, I kept working in that industry still too on the side, and started working as a bookkeeper probably like around 16, 17 years ago. And I worked with someone who had their own business and clients on their own. And then I realized, hey, I could do that on my own. And so I actually did. And I went and just posted an ad on Craigslist and started getting a few clients on my own. So I actually do bookkeeping on the side. I have my own small bookkeeping business. And so that is where I kind of gained all this accounting background, financial background that I know. And it's definitely helped me run the business, because I can do all these things like financial accounting, bookkeeping, and I don't have to outsource all of that and keep it internally, but I also understand it, so I can like explain it to my PI, you know, when we're talking about reports and financial stuff in a way that he understands it without having to go through a CPA. So that's actually pretty cool.
Well, I'm sure you're a blessing to your PI.
Yeah, so you're a true generalist. Like we always keep on mentioning that. And obviously, Dan was the one that started all. Judy, one thing that you learned by having the business? I mean, obviously, you learn all the background, the process, and all the stuff when you were working at the research facility where you were working. But then after that, when you had your own site, what was something that you learned that you didn't?
So I had to learn contracts and budgets, which, you know, to this day, even though I have an accounting background, I'm not a huge fan of working on them, but I know I have to do it. But I had to learn that, because at my research center, we had a director, we had a manager at the old research center. So I wasn't exposed to that. I didn't have to do that. I think the most that we had to do was like regulatory for our studies. And that's pretty much anything financial we didn't really mess with. So that was a whole new thing that I didn't know anything about. And I think I took some online classes. I read stuff. I Googled whatever I could find information. I might have outreached, like, I think I reached out to, you know, a few contacts I had at that time to figure this out. And I learned over the years. I mean, I probably, if I go back and look at my original contracts and budgets, they probably weren't that great. They could have been better. But I think over the years I have learned. I actually do attend the Magi conference, the contracts and budgets, just specifically to update myself on information in regards to contracts, budgets, things to include, things to consider, because every year it's changing, you know, all this information that you can request, things for the site. It's just actually throughout the year it changes, and especially like the past year with COVID, now all these things that you got to consider, that you got to get reimbursed for, you got to get covered, what things you can ask for, and then transitioning to electronic systems, that's another thing you got to consider, or you're implementing, so then the overhead is higher. Just all these, like, that was probably, I think, one of the hardest things I had to learn. And I'm still learning. 17 years later, I'm still learning and figuring all that stuff out when it comes to contracts and budgets.
So finding studies on your own, you mentioned you got a broker though. So I would think
Yeah,
that would be the
so
first and foremost.
yeah, I guess that. So I would say it was harder, but it wasn't, because we got lucky with a broker we had at that time, who I still keep in contact with, and we did get studies. Probably a year or two into it. It took us. It was a very slow startup, but finally, when we started getting studies, we were kind of getting them consistently. But then over the 13 years, though, we did have some slow periods. So
yeah.
We didn't continue with a broker, but it was just keeping that constant flow of studies and outreach, because you still have to do a ton of business development as a site owner.
Right.
You still have to reach out. I mean, you would think you would get repeat work from the studies and the sponsors you work with, but you don't all the time. So you just have to kind of stay on top of the pipeline and the study leads. And if you don't, then that's why research centers have the slow periods that they do.
I mean, the lifeblood I'm sorry, Monica. The lifeblood of a research center is studies, patients. I mean,
exactly.
if you're lacking in either of those, I mean, of course you want the best budget you can get, but if you're lacking in those other two, well, it doesn't matter what the budget is.
Exactly.
You don't have any patients or studies.
Or you don't have studies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
what do you do? Sorry, Chris.
No, I'm done.
Okay. What do you do in order to keep up the flow or the pipeline always busy?
So at that time we worked with, they were kind of these two study brokers that we worked with over the years. I think one went on his own. I actually keep in contact with one of them still to this day, and I still get referrals from him all the time. And I still pretty much follow up on any leads that I get. Like now we get emails from the various databases that we're registered with, like, that you fill out for your investigator. So we actually do get, I've noticed in the past couple of years, we get more consistent questionnaires about the various studies they have, feasibility questionnaires. So we fill those out, follow up with any contacts that I have on upcoming studies. We let our monitors know that, we're interested in more studies. Now reaching out on LinkedIn. So anytime I see some kind of article about a medication, or it's in this phase, then I'll go to their website and see, like, oh, okay, are they going to go into phase 2 or 3? Then that's something we can work on. And so I see, how can I find out how I can email them or get a contact, or who knows who I can reach out to for this company so I can find out more about this. So it's a combination of things. It's just not one thing that you do to get studies. You have to be on top of this, because if you don't do all of those things, then you're not going to get those studies, and it's not going to be a consistent flow.
Well, I'm just so grateful I'm around you guys, because all of y'all are very, very persistent in each of the things that you'll do. And so it just really gives me insight, and I keep learning. So y'all keep learning so that I can keep learning.
We'll do what we can for you, Ashley.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it. Seriously, don't fall. Don't falter.
Julie,
but all right.
If somebody is thinking on opening a site, what will be a tip that you will give them to start their business?
So if they're thinking of opening a site, first you have to find a good PI. So a good PI who is going to put in that time and effort that you need to get the site started. On the other hand of it, you need to start reaching out for potential studies. What type of patients do you have with this PI, or what database do you have? Hopefully, you should have a PI who is connected to a database, whether his private practice or somewhere where you're going to recruit these patients from, that he does have patients, and focus on those. I think those therapeutic studies that you want to bring on that he has patients for. But you definitely need a dedicated PI and the studies coming in, the patient population, in order to be successful. The other stuff, like setting it up, is pretty easy. I mean, getting the licenses, that's not too bad. It's just having the combination of the PI and the studies and the patient population that's going to really make you successful, as well as you start to grow that staff that is going to support all of those efforts to make it successful.
Wow. Awesome.
Yeah, that's great. Or you can also always reach out to the SCS and get DSCS is a company, for those that don't know. DSCS is a company that Chris and Dan has, and they do, they basically hold your hand until your business is successful and working.
Yes, and you know what? If I knew they would have existed back then when we started, and I don't know, maybe you guys did 13 years ago, I totally would have used your services, and then I would have saved myself so much time and all this effort and everything that we had to do.
Headaches specifically.
Yes, headaches specifically. Like a lot of stuff you guys already have in place that I wouldn't have to deal with, especially with the whole study leads. I definitely recommend it. But it started the way it did. But for anybody looking to start a new research center, definitely, like a service like yourself, definitely reach out, and then you'll save so much time, and then you can focus on the other things you need to do to get this research center started.
Well, very kind of both of you.
And you know what? Before we end, just another plug: CRC and CRA Academy. Check it out if you're new to the industry, and also,
this has turned into a commercial.
I know, just say, giving resources, it works. But
none of that existed when I started 13 years ago. Or I didn't know.
And I think that's also why we created Latinos in Clinical Research, right? There wasn't an organization like this. We're creating that platform. So all the more reason why we definitely need to share this information with you guys. CRC Academy, CRA Academy, for those that are PIs, soon to be PI Academy. And so definitely a lot of things in the works, trying to bring as much as we can to you all. But thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate it. Please subscribe to us on LinkedIn or on our website, latinosinClinicalResearch.com. If you have any questions, please reach out to me, Judy, Monica, or Chris, or even Dan, and we'll be happy to help you. Other than that, thank you so much, and y'all have
great
a
information, day. Judy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you,
Judy.